toxic yet. I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa now.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am Vanessa Chang. I'm the Director of Programs at Leonardo and also guest editor of this issue. I'm a mixed race woman with light skin. I'm Asian and white. I have shoulder length dark hair and a white scarf with sugar gliders on it. And I'm against a virtual background, which is gray with yellow bands that says Leonardo Criptech Incubator. Today, we are calling in from the traditional and unceded territories of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, or San Francisco. I'd like to thank the partners who made this issue possible, the editorial team at Leonardo and MIT Press, as well as the California Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Ford Foundation. You can check out the issue at the link we're dropping in the chat and a gallery of some of its artworks and cultural artifacts, which will be shared and discussed today. So we'll drop both of these links into the chat right now. So one second. This is the link to the issue, and you can check out some of the images and artworks in the issue here in this gallery. Okay. So today, after we introduce our presenters, they will each introduce their work. After that, we will move on to the roundtable discussion, and we will conclude with the Q&A. For the Q&A, you can ask questions by sharing questions in the chat or DMing Jason Lam. We will do our best to get to everyone at the end, time permitting. With that, I'd like to introduce our access doula, Claudia Alec, who will go over some of the access processes here today.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Let's talk about access. My name is Claudia Alec, and I am here acting as an access doula. So I've been present to help us design our access plan together, and I'm here today to help us birth the access possibilities that we desire and need in this particular session. Visual description: I'm an African-American woman wearing an orange hat, and I've got red dreadlocks and a polka dot dress, and I'm wearing safety gloves, and I am sitting in front of a projected background that says Leonardo Criptech Incubator behind me. My access check-in: I'm a physically disabled person, and sometimes I might pull a face because I'm having a surge of pain, but I'm very rarely pulling a face because I have a bad opinion. So I just request that people don't overinterpret my erratic body language. Other than that, all of my access needs are met. The access check-in is an intervention to help us to recognize that all spaces are not immediately accessible, and sometimes it takes a little bit of conversation. Access exists outside of space and time. It requires some time travel, but luckily we set ourselves up for success in the past with our access riders and access check-ins. So these are the access choreographies we've designed based on what you have all already communicated with us. For physical accessibility, we're meeting virtually. For COVID-safe accessibility, we're meeting virtually. For oral accessibility, we have captions. We had planned to have sign language interpretation, but something happened and our sign language interpreters did not show up at the last minute. And so we just recognized that these things happen. Oh, I see that Vanessa has raised a hand. Did you want to interrupt to inform?
Yeah, Claudia, it looks like the interpreters are here, but they're struggling with technology, not having audio. So they're working on it right now.
Oh, that is brilliant. We did meet a full 45 minutes early to give ourselves enough time to negotiate the additional technology barriers that sometimes come up. We're so pleased that our sign language interpreters are going to be working through that barrier to be able to join us and give support. So we have for oral accessibility, ASL, and captions. We have for visual accessibility, we're going to be doing some limited visual descriptions. For cognitive accessibility, we provided our questions ahead of time. We are reviewing what we are about to do before we do it. So you'll note that as part of this script, we say what we're going to do and then we do it. Also, any new questions that come up in this session, we're going to phrase them or a yes or no question so people can respond immediately. And then if we want to do like a round robin, we can always do that so people can come back. But we're going to phrase questions that come up spontaneously in this space as yes or no. Also, there was a request for breaks. We're often negotiating competing access challenges. So for this session, we were unable to schedule in formal breaks because we're attempting to stay inside the footprint of time. However, this session is recorded. So we request you take care of your body, mind. Take any breaks that you need. We will be providing a recording so you will be able to access this asynchronously in the future. Take any breaks that you feel you need. We are here to listen to the artists featured in Criptech and the Art of Access. The Leonardo Criptech Incubator chronicles the emergence of access as an animating principle of art, science, and technology, exploring methods in art and technology that arise from and viscerally embody lived experiences of disability. And artists deploy access as a creative form, an emancipatory tool, and an experiential technology for sustaining community. We understand that access here is defined as design justice. This is anchored in the idea that this is restorative work, and we have an empowered identification of crip. Functioning as both a noun and a verb, the term crip reclaims disability as an identity and challenges prevailing ableist narratives that technology serves to normalize or rehabilitate disability. We invite you to be physically at ease as you listen to all of these amazing good ideas. Please use the chat function inside the Zoom to direct message me, Claudia Alec, if you have any access needs that come up as this session is going. We recognize that access is a creative practice that goes beyond mere compliance. Our disabled community is not homogeneous, and our needs are not identical or static. Access requires communication and collaboration from all parties. While we are thoughtfully planning access interventions, we also know that there will be unexpected barriers. Access is a process and progress. It is not perfection. Perfection is a confining concept of supremacy culture. It's a thought-ending cliche. We recognize that access frictions will be inevitable, and we embrace them as learning opportunities. Access is not limited to physical boundaries. It extends remotely and across space and time. As artists, we feel the weight when access fails occur, but we also acknowledge that perfect access is an impossibility. So we are so excited to be on this journey with you as we build access today and tomorrow. This access performance is an act of art. I would like to pass the microphone to Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Claudia. So just a few brief remarks to set up a roundtable and introductions of our participants. Criptech and the Art of Access aligns with the work of Leonardo Criptech Incubator, which is a creative platform for disability innovation in art and technology. This issue draws together emerging scholarship and work in Crip Technoscience with artistic practices that expand the creative horizon of accessibility. In recent years, scholars, activists, and arts practitioners have demonstrated the power of aesthetic access or creative access in museums, curated exhibitions, and art spaces, reimagining what access can be when it transcends basic accommodation or regulatory compliance. This is an exciting paradigm shift that opens up new sensory possibility in arts engagement. The field of Criptech art, which this issue seeks to introduce, names a collective group of disabled artists who engage with digital and scientific technologies as both a creative medium and avenue for Crip practice. The issue's contributors Crip art, science and technology, knowledge, and practice through works that build in access as a creative or design principle in digital art and art-making tools.
Thank you, Lindsay. With that, we're thrilled to introduce today's speakers and projects. So I'm going to add Laura. So Laura Forlano is a Fulbright Award-winning scholar, writer, social scientist, and design researcher, as well as professor of art and design and communication studies at Northeastern University. Laura, please introduce your project.
Great. Yes. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I am identified as a white woman living with a disability. I am type 1 diabetic, and I use a wide range of technologies, including sensor systems and an insulin pump to manage my disability. So this first image that I want to tell you about from the article that I co-authored with Itziar Barrio, the article is called From Data Doubles to Data Demons, and this image is actually the gallery view. It has 3 large screens mounted at different angles, and it's flanked on the right side by pedestals and a bench. And the show at Smack Melon Gallery in Dumbo in Brooklyn, New York, is a solo show by Itziar Barrio named Did Not Feel Low, Was Sleeping. And that title is actually drawn directly from my field notes on my insulin pump alert and alarm data, which was used in the production of several of the sculptures in the show. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of some of the data that I've been working with for the last 5 years, this is a set of data, alert and alarm data from the smart insulin pump. And you can see over 24 different alerts or alarms that I received throughout a typical day. This was July 27th of 2019. And that data is laid out on a backdrop, which is a picture of a pair of pajamas that is actually a turquoise pair of pajamas with blue fish and pink fins. And that's actually a pair of pajamas that I own. And this this particular image and this particular data is quite interesting, because one of the phenomenon that I've been living with as a result of living with these particular systems was around sleep deprivation and sleep interruption, which is why this particular data set was so important and interesting in the project and some of the writing that I've done. Next slide, please. Here, this is a picture of actually one of the sculptures, and Itziar Barrio and I met in the fall of 2020 through the New Museum, New Ink incubator. And she had been working on a series of sculptures. And then about 9 months later, after we had met many times talking about common issues that we were interested in, such as cyborg theories of the post-human, I did a studio visit and was able to see some of these works in progress. And then a number of months later, as we tell in the piece, Itziar approached me to ask whether it might be interesting to use my data as a way of controlling the movement of the sculptures. So this particular sculpture is called Through the Night. It is made of concrete, spandex, lighting filters, hardware, epoxy resin, an Arduino circuit, motor, custom circuit board, which is printed with some of that same data from a different day of the month, but some of the same data from the insulin pump and sensor system. Next slide, please. And finally, this last slide that I'll show, just to give you a sense of the various kinds of work. So there were a number of robotic sculptures in the gallery, and then there were some of these more static objects, art objects. So this is a frame shadow box of my data again. This is called Artifact 2. That was mounted on the wall, and it contains the white lettering, which is etched on the black circuit board, which presents the data as both text and material. So all of these images give you a sense of what the work looked like, and some of aspects of the collaboration that you can see. And in the following discussion, I hope to provide a little bit more insight as to why this matters for my own practice as a social scientist and writer, and design researcher, and how that responds to some of the questions that are guiding this session. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. This is Lindsay speaking, and I am delighted to introduce next Erica Jean Lincoln, who is an independent artist and board member of Arts Accessibility Network of Manitoba.
I work in the disciplines of new media arts and disability arts. I can be found either in the studio or outdoors, in a deep attention with something in the world. My tinkered devices are always with me, assisting with cognitive tasks. Different iterations of these devices are integrated into my artworks, acting as stand-ins or agents, sharing my emotional and physical experiences. Hi, I'm going to read from my notes. I asked Adobe's AI Assist to help. I gave the Assist 3 questions. How would you introduce this article to an audience of academics, artists, and machine learning experts? The following is a mashup of the Assist's answers. The video and images accompanying the screen reader voiceover were generated from the project described in the article.
am excited, thrilled to introduce to you an intriguing, inspiring, a fascinating article. In this article, Lincoln takes us on a journey, delves into their world of the concept of Crip Technoscience, a methodology that reflects their artistic tinkering within media arts. They discuss their neurodivergent perspective and how their arts practice serves as a means of navigating and interpreting the world of technoscientific cultures and devices through tinkering, re-engineering, and reinventing. One fascinating aspect of this article is the artist's discussion of their learning styles, namely hoarding and circumstantiality. But it doesn't stop there. Lincoln also discusses how these styles inform their memory and learning processes. They share their approach to dataset creation and transfer learning within machine learning models, which adds a whole new dimension to their artistic practice. What makes this article particularly intriguing for machine learning experts is Lincoln's insights into the concept of generative adversarial networks, GANs, and how they manipulated dataset construction and transfer learning within the model to reflect the diversity of neurodivergent learning. I believe this article will spark engaging discussions and inspire further exploration in our academic community. I believe this article will ignite your imagination, spark new ideas, and inspire you to explore the possibilities that emerge when art and technology intersect in innovative ways. I believe this article will spark engaging discussions and inspire further exploration in the field of machine learning, pushing the boundaries of what is possible and encouraging innovative approaches to the discipline.
Thank you so much, Erica. We are going to make a quick adjustment to our order, and I am delighted to introduce next Darren Martin, who is an Oakland-based artist, educator, and curator, as well as professor and co-chair in the Department of Art and Art History at UC Davis.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for everyone involved in putting this together, Vanessa and Lindsay especially. I am a Caucasian male with middle-aged man with a mustache and short cropped hair, chestnut with some gray speckled in. And my essay titled Experimental Modalities, Crip Representation and Access with Electronic Arts Intermix culminates in the kind of projection of my own experiences, synthesizing acts of participatory audio description and considerations of open captions from my own art making practice and from working with other disability studies artists and scholars. And so projecting this onto a curatorial process by working with Electronic Arts Intermix, which is the oldest existing video arts distributor in the US. In some ways, thinking about this task as it's cripping an archive. And the screening happened about a year ago in March 2023, where I assembled a program of works by 6 artists whose practices span from early conceptual video to contemporary performance, and they're engaging with themes of perceptual difference, semiotic play, and embodiment. And so the image that you see here is the first piece. So it's from Wu Tsang's work embodying where they embodied the work of lay autism rights activist Mel Baggs, and as an attempt to and so the image itself is the artist with a teary-eyed standing in front of kind of silvery screen, and on the bottom is yellow text that says, "It is meant as a strong statement on the existence." Next slide, please. Another work in the piece is, so thinking about Crip representation within the archive, but also thinking about how one could reclaim certain practices within the archive. Like this is an image from John Baldessari's The Meaning of Various News Photos to Ed Henderson, where the artist put a series of images up that were then asked Ed Henderson, a fellow artist, to describe. And in some ways, those descriptions create these kind of links and connections between the images that were chosen, and also kind of project that Ed Henderson's own thoughts upon them. And next slide, please. This is from the work of Cecilia Vicuna's work that's an emotional summary of a film, Gasland 2, that rings the alarm of specific man-made environmental catastrophes. And she's a poet, that parts of the video were already subtitled. So kind of looking at works that include subtitles, include text, and that might be for not necessarily intentions of access, but thinking of kind of reframing them within that area. That other works in the program were Phyllis Baldino's work, which was made from a moment when she had this kind of blind spot in her vision. Those works, there were 2 very short pieces that had very little sound. And so we at Electronic Arts Intermix worked with her to come up with visual descriptions, and that played on top of those images, those video works. And then Lawrence Andrews' work was also in the mix, and Shauna Moulton's Whispering Pines, which was the last piece of the program, where I asked various sections of the audience to describe, get engaged with a participatory active description. And so that kind of brought us into a very engaged Q&A as well. So yeah, Electronic Arts Intermix is very open. It's a nonprofit that was very open to the idea of working with artists and trying to build access into programs that were demanding such. They working with very little resources, but they're trying to build access into their programs and into their collection through this through engagement with various artists. So I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Now I'd like to introduce Isolde Stianon and Marina Septina, Isolde Stianon is a poet, artist, and disability advocate who lives in Brooklyn, New York. And Marina Septina is an eco-puppetry performing artist, writer, disability culture activist, and scholar based in Nina Pehoking, or New York City. They've shared a video for us today.
Ready? Okay.
The title of our article comes from a sentence in one of my poems.
Gold? Oh, burnt sienna. Was that, okay, so I saw your eyes on the gold.
Primitive way country, come look
So I've
inside.
seen you look look at burnt sienna, natural umber, and flesh. Do you want a deeper dark brown, or a lighter brown? Deeper dark brown or lighter brown? Deeper, lighter brown. Okay. Ready?
I do not feel a connection to this computer voice. This technology is an important tool to express my thinking, but this computer is not my voice. My expression, the fullness of my voice, far exceeds the limits of this technology in verbal language.
Ready? Ready? There you go. Yep, you got it. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, nope. I saw your eyes go on vermilion.
This assistive communication enabled me to have a voice recognized by society, but even still, many people don't believe I am choosing these words and sentences in a meaningful way, because they do not believe I am a thinking person. And if they don't believe I am a thinking person, then this technology becomes a tool that is used against me. Too bad for them.
That's how you tell me that you're done.
I need this technology. I depend on this technology to have a verbal spoken voice. But a lot of my communication is through my body, outside of verbal language in this technology. Words are only one small part of communication.
Breathe in. Beautiful. Yep.
Primitive way country, come look inside.
Let's keep going. Ready?
Thank you. Right, and our final short presentation is from Aminder Virdi, who is an artist, activist, writer, and facilitator, filmmaker, founder of Disabled Intersectional Voices in the Arts, DIVA, and co-founder of Crip Joy. Is Aminder?
My article is titled Staring Back, Hacking Intersectional Oppressions Through Eco-Crip Cybertechnical Futures. Before I go on, I'd like to just quickly highlight over the 3 X-ray boxes that each one includes Punjabi scripture. From left to right, they state, disabled bodies are sites of resistance. The second one, disabled bodies transcend mobility. And the third one, disabled bodies are the future. Eco-Crip Cybertechnical Futures is a triptych of transmedia art, which is created through computational art, biodata, digital painting, visual bioarchives from indigenous South Asian flora to my personal archive of hospital quantified X-rays, and tied together with machine learning, a subset of artificial intelligence. This was then further enhanced through the use of Punjabi scripture. The visuals are presented on 20th century medical X-ray light boxes, aiming to subvert the objectification of my lifelong subjection to medical imaging and the clinical, diagnostic, capitalist, white, male, ableist, and Western gaze. I utilize and repurpose machine learning whilst being completely aware of its tendency to perpetuate and exploit statistical biases that are within data sets. And this is due to algorithms often learning from historical data that reflects past prejudices. Next slide, please. Within the clinical encounter, our bodies are often viewed from a deficit-based pathological model that positions disability as a deviation of normal, in quote marks. In these encounters and under the clinical and diagnostic gaze, we are often reduced to a collection of depersonalized medical terms that disregard disability as an inherent aspect of human variation, and it strips away the patient's agency and individuality to a one-dimensional identity, overlooking intersectionality, especially for disabled Black, Brown, and Indigenous individuals. Next slide, please. EcoCrip aims to liberate Indian painting traditions from the grasps of colonialism and the violence continued by the preservation in contemporary white-led institutions and collections. The visuals are enhanced through digital painting to reflect the aesthetic of South Asian botanical art from the 17th to 19th centuries. This era is crucial to EcoCrip, as botanical art gained prominence in India during the 18th to 19th centuries under the colonial patronage of the East India companies. So here, I give data back to the disabled body mind, including all facets of my identity, race, ethnicity, gender, disability, and class into these X-rays in a manner that amplifies my intersectional identity rather than biological differences, and celebrates the presence of the invisible, visible, and hypervisible, disabled, neurodivergent, chronically ill, brown, South Asian, female body mind. Next slide, please. My practice in general reworlds through lived and collective experience, creating works that envision a future rooted in disability justice. I critique and reconstruct existence by exploring more equitable, sustainable, accessible conditions and alternative possibilities and futures. Often this is through the lens of magical realism, merging the real with an element of magic, from dreaming justice to access magic. Next slide, please. Lastly, I introduce the term cybotanical to describe an art form and ecosomatic embodiment deriving from my and the collective lived experiences. It comes from the fusing of the disabled cyborg Cripborg body, defined by Nelson, Shu, and Stevens, with the reality of internal and external implants, devices, technologies, and modes of mobility, alongside Indian botanical art, unburdened from the colonial and clinical gaze. And just as nature and ecology encompass various forms, adaptations, and interactions, the cybotanical highlights the inherent connection between the Cripborg body and the natural world, reflecting the complex web that interconnects with rewilding skills, ancestral legacies, and the essence of disability justice, whilst highlighting the mainstream exclusion of disabled individuals from eco-justice movements. Thank you.
Thank you, Aminda, and thank you everybody for these introductions. So this final slide features the front cover of the special issue. It is almost entirely bright blue with the words, "The book is closed forever," in capital letters, "access denied." And this is a screenshot from Andy Slater's Unseen Sound. And this is against a gray and yellow banner that encourages people to go ahead and read it now. So we're going to switch over now to the roundtable portion of our presentation.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to introduce the roundtable and some of the framing themes of the issue to get us started. So Crip Technoscience, or Criptech for short, is a term coined by Amy Hamre and Kelly Frisch that defines a field of research invested in recentering the skills and knowledge disabled people cultivate to remake inaccessible worlds. Despite their multimodal capacities, many media and science-based art and art-making tools such as VR, AR, digital games, and biotech remain inaccessible and have yet to benefit from this critical attention. It is this gap that this special issue and roundtable seeks to address.
Okay, so this is Lindsay speaking. We're going to begin with our first question for the group. And I'm going to frame the question and I'm going to call on folks just to make it a little bit easier to follow along. And we're going to hear from everybody. So our first question is, how has creative access shaped your thinking and practice? And how might your work participate in Crip Technoscience? So I'm going to start by inviting the first pairings, Darren, as well as Marina and Yasod. So Darren, would you like to go first?
Oh, did you say me? Oh, hi. So yeah, thinking about, Crip Technoscience as a mode of, reinventing existing archives, but also thinking like artistically in my own practice. I've made some works where the works themselves spring from audio description, or that open captions are kind of central to the work itself, and not as something that is added on as an afterthought. So thinking in regards to the essay and my curatorial intervention, I was, looking at this amazing collection of video art works that spans decades, and trying to identify, this was just one version, but trying to, first, actually, I came to that collection looking for Crip representation and feeling like I could not necessarily flesh out an entire program. There was a kind of a lack. So then I started really thinking broader about ways to reinvent what's there, what's present, or reframe, I should say, right? So there's moments where there are Crip representation, like say Phyllis Baldino's blind piece, where she's made a piece that kind of simulates this experience of having a blind spot after a brief stroke, and then working with the institution to try to figure out ways that they can work with the artist to bring in audio description, or again, thinking about ways. I know I didn't really discuss Andrew Lawrence's work, but he had a piece called Selections from the Library, drawing from a complex set of sound and minimal images and text that in some ways were kind of asking the audience member to build an image in their head rather than describing images on screen. So think of all these like discursive ways to center tropes of access, particularly within moving image discourse, particularly audio description and open captions, and trying to place them in the center of a curatorial intervention. And so, electronic art dynamics, the pieces that didn't have captions, provided captions, and also thinking about ways to bring in an audience engagement through participation, particularly with the Shauna Moulton piece. So yeah, just kind of trying to reclaim those types of ways that access gets provided, but as center rather than as as a center to practice rather than as something that comes later. Thanks.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, we'll go to Marina and your thought.
Designed with the assumption that I do not think. This technology is designed with the assumption that I do not need access to express complex thoughts, perspectives, and emotions, as if non-speaking people only need to express simplistic needs and wants.
Okay, thank you so much, Marina, your thoughts. So let's go to our next pairing now. So that would be Erica, followed by Linda, and
Okay.
then Laura. Oh,
Lindsay, maybe have a pause. It looked like Isolde was unmuting.
Oh,
Marina,
I'm
did you have
sorry.
something to add to that?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, the machine will sometimes just mute after an answer. So if you could just give us a moment of breath there.
My thinking does not depend on this technology, but this technology shapes how I am able to express my thinking. All of the words in this communication program are programmed by other people because I cannot type with my eyes. Their perspectives are part of the verbal choices I have access to.
I'll pick this one, okay?
Through improvisation, I am able to bring different words and ideas together that are programmed into this communication program in nonlinear, associative, and poetic ways. This is how I break out of the limitations of this technology to express my own perspective. I can weave together the fragments of the many words and sentences in this program to open a door into the world of my imagination and ideas, into my inland river valleys.
And it's Marina here. I'll speak from my perspective that, you know, Isolde and I really established an expansive vocabulary for describing the embodied communicativity of our communication moments. In terms of the poetics of embodied energy, the rhythms, pauses, movements, spaciousness of how the body communicates. And all of that happens first in the body. And it's not forcing silences or pauses or breaths to resolve into resolute knowability. And my personal practice is deeply interdisciplinary, but the heart of my work is I'm a conservatory trained performing artist, and I bring my body-based performance to my work with Isolde and to how we communicate. And I also bring my resistance to the colonial ideologies within Western science that have rendered the speaking earth mute and have rendered the speaking body mute. And I really learned this from Isolde. We kind of needed a concept to describe the way our communication happens. And we called it ground time. And ground time is the absorption between a cause and an effect. So a question gets absorbed into the body, and a feeling might come, a rhythm might come, a verbal response might come, or not. But that is foundational to all communication. And in terms of how it connects to Crip Technoscience, it centers how expansive embodiment is, how expansive communication is. And it far exceeds what any of us can understand and what any technology can understand and comprehend. And it even goes to, I'll close with, it even goes to how we captioned our introductory video. I noticed that I was putting in brackets the vocalizations of Isolde, right? The rhythms of the body. And I was like, why am I bracketing it? That is the same way that the kind of the tyranny of the rational and the tyranny of narrative and a very simplistic, flat way of understanding thought and language is coming through. So I was like, no, remove the brackets. Like that is as much a part of the communication as anything else that we're saying. So yeah, thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you both. Okay, let's go to Erica Jean.
Hello, everyone. So for the what I've done is written down again my kind of answers to the questions. So I'm just going to read them. I'm just a quick description. I'm sitting in my studio. Behind me are plants, and I'm wearing a headset, glasses, and a toque, and a red. white shirt. Okay. I've always been a tinkerer, taking things apart and putting them back together so I can use them in a way that felt more in tune with me, which I think is in relation to what Isolde and Marina were talking about, tuning in. Tools, radios, typewriters, and desks, these things all don't fit. So it's a question of trying to make them fit. I did not understand it as access at the time. I found that I was always frustrated that I could not communicate well with my peers or learn from my educators. I came to Crip Technoscience Manifesto in 2020 during a Canada Council for the Arts funded research project on neurodivergence and artificial intelligence. While I was reading the manifesto, I had come to understand that everything that I was doing in my art practice reflected a certain fixing of things, aligning of things, and reflecting of things to my way of being and knowing in the world. Spoken language and written text are barriers for me, to me. For 20 years, I've been using the tech of media arts to communicate visually, sonically, and gesturally through the manipulation of materials. It's been hard to explain to folks in the art world that my interactive installation and robots are communicating as me. I think my work has always been about access, although I didn't have a word for it. The terms creative access or art of access are still new to me, but definitely define what I do. End of sentence.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Erica, Jean. Some really nice connections here. So I want to turn it over now to Aminda.
Born disabled, I've only known and navigated an inaccessible world. So I've always created hacks and adaptations to move, eat, make art. But often I was told off or ridiculed for doing things differently at school. But hacking was always an unconscious act until about 15 years ago, when I started thinking about how I create art whilst I'm attempting to recover from many major operations. Creating new worlds through art has always been my joy and my form of catharsis. So adapting my site of practice from bed to desk to hospital, this kind of mode of adaptation found its way into my artwork. So creative access also flows through the choices behind or the reshaping of my use of mediums, art forms, materials, tools, and technology. And it can be anything from natural materials to devices to discarded plasters. Alongside my use of transgressive appropriation of medical bioimaging and the physical act of hacking both medical technologies and systemic structures, I found that this fit really well into the Crip Technoscience manifesto, which is incredible and advocates for the integration of disabled expertise in technology and design. But not only that, it breaks barriers and actively reconceptualizes these barriers as new opportunities for innovation and inclusion.
Thanks so much, Aminda. Okay, we're going to wrap up this question with Laura.
Okay, thanks so much, Lindsay. Yeah, so I think for me, the Crip Technoscience framing makes a lot of sense, specifically because I've been writing about this topic, specifically my own experience of living with an insulin pump and sensor system since about 2015. And I think a lot about the labor of living with disability, as well as the labor of living with machines in particular. And I often say that I'm not sure if I'm taking care of the machines or whether the machines are taking care of me, right? Because of the intense engagement around daily routines of fixing and maintaining the systems themselves, right? And I often talk about AI or these smart systems as themselves disabled, right? So one of the things I've been writing about is to try to challenge perfection and the kind of magical properties that we often attribute to some of these devices or AI technology at the moment, and to sort of reframe with a more realistic and more kind of symmetrical understanding of what it means to be human and what it means to be a machine. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to center on that data set that I showed, is to really show also the way the machine communicates with me, right? So this constant alerts and alarms that kind of go throughout the day, and also the fact that the device itself is worn on the body. So when there's an alert or alarm, I get, I hear a vibration, or I feel a buzzing. And so of course it's meant to wake you up, but it also, you develop that kind of somatic embodied understanding of the communication with the machine as well. And for me, moving, kind of a little bit away from a more social scientific understanding of this topic, or that my own experience, and then through the collaborative project with Itziar Barrio, being able to see this opportunity not only for critique of say ableism in the academy, or a critique of specific technology systems, but to really see how a creative project could open up new opportunities to make visible my experience, but also to translate it and kind of refract it through these different objects. So I talk a lot in the piece about this experience of really being very disoriented when I got to the gallery the very first time I saw the works on display, because of this kind of recognition that, like, the text on the door of the gallery was something I wrote in my field notes, and then this encountering these sculptures, which I had seen, many months before, but now interpreted with this, with my data set, both controlling some of the movements of the sculptures, but also printed as a text as part of the circuit board, and also as part of the fixed pieces that were hung on the wall. So it's really opened up for me an opportunity to be more generative in the work and what I think I might do with this data set. I would say the other thing is really becoming, when I present this work, I typically am able to take on a much more performative way of presenting my research. So I do kind of a data performance by reading aloud these same alerts and alarms that then also are part of the sculpture. So that's my thinking.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the next question. In a way, some of this has already started to come up in your reflections, but we wanted to ask, how does your practice explore the ways machines mediate your lived experiences, whether that be your senses, communication, cognition, or your own data? So I'd like to turn it to Isolde and Marina, if it's a good time.
My disabled life is my practice. Marina typed this sentence that I am saying right now into a little gray box and programmed it into the communication technology. Then my gaze selected this button and the computer voice is speaking it out loud. My verbal responses are mediated through an interface written by the hands and minds of other people. Does that change your perception of me? The various medical systems that decide what kind of technology that a nonverbal disabled person may use is often based on discriminatory testing and data. When the medical and state systems allowed me to have a speaking voice, it became crucial to my life experience. But this technology cannot help me express my experiences, perspectives, and thoughts if you don't believe that I am a thinking person. You will not believe my voice through this technology if you don't listen to all the other ways that I communicate. These sentences were typed in combination by my mother and by Marina. Do you believe me? My mother once said to Marina that when I am by the water, I become the water. And Alice Wong said, I am a disabled oracle. How can me, myself, i.e. Sada, express to you how I become next to the water? The poetry of my body is the way. Pause, breath, sound and hum, rhythm, feeling, sensation, and spontaneous improvisation through pre-programmed words. Verbal shards, pieces of words and sentences. I bounce them against one another into meaning, into chaos, into glitch, into meaning. Spoken with pre-programmed vocal intonations that I do not choose, that does not pronounce my name correctly. My disabled life is my practice. Listen, listen, listen.
In our article, we describe the way we go back and forth in forming the sentences and responses and all of that. I'll speak from my perspective briefly that all of my work is grounded in liberating the most neglected technologies that I am aware of, which is the speaking body and the living speaking earth. And neither flesh nor earth are machines. So I'm really much more of a disabled Luddite than I am a Crip Technoscientist. And I think that is my strength, because my hope for the power of Crip Technoscience is to make a powerful intervention and incision point into the colonial ideologies of mastery, control, and domination that the Silicon Valley pharmaceutical companies and biotech industries and the medical industrial complex exert relentlessly, nonstop, and it permeates every education system. And for Crip Technoscience to lodge a permanent friction point into techno-ableism by centering the fact that, for example, flesh that wears a prosthetic leg rubs and becomes sore. And that this ache is an inerasable friction in the dreams of seamless human-machine fusions, and that the body embodiment and embodied communication exceeds what any human being and technology can imagine and understand. And that life, just as the disabled body-mind, is uncontrollable. End thought.
Thank you, Isolde. Thank you, Marina. Laura, I'd like to invite your response to this question.
Sure. I touched on it a little bit, I think, already, but I mean, definitely when one is living, 24 hours a day with any kind of, medical device or machine, there's a lot, as I mentioned, the labor. So I'll just mention a recent anecdote that kind of gives you a sense of what this relationship might look like. Sometimes I have written about it as, a disabled cyborg identity or a post-human subjectivity. A couple of weeks ago, the company that makes the insulin pump updated their app, and the app on the phone allows you to control the insulin pump with your phone. So whenever you eat a meal, you decide, how much carbs you're going to eat, and then you program that into your phone, and then it sends that to your device. And what happened is I noticed, this was about 2 weeks ago, I noticed that suddenly the battery on my insulin pump was draining incredibly quickly. So it was going from 100 down to 50, down to 30, down to 0 on a single day. And normally, if you charge the pump, it takes about 3 days for the, before you have to recharge it again. And so this was just a strange discovery that, okay, suddenly, and I thought, oh, perhaps this goes to the creative thinking or around problem solving with everyday life with machines. So I was thinking, okay, maybe my pump is now 2 years old. And so I think what's happening is that it's just getting degraded, just like an iPhone or any other device. And so now I'm going to have to create new routines where every day I'm going to need to remember to charge it in the morning when I'm eating breakfast. Otherwise, this battery is going to drain, right? And so then by the third day, after, you know, kind of trying to think about all the possible reasons for this, the company set out an alert that basically said, or an email that basically said that due to an upgrade on the app, unintentionally, the app was draining the pump battery very severely. Now, so, okay, so it was addressed within 48 hours. However, you know, what I do talk about a lot in my writing is that these seemingly small updates to the machines that mediate our life, that you almost wouldn't even think of, right? When you're, you know, the apps on your phone update all the time, right? That these actually matter quite a lot. And, you know, they might even matter in terms of like life and death, right? So being very attentive to these patterns of, oh, you know, how long does it take for the battery to drain, and when do I need to recharge? And I talk a lot about how one needs to, you know, reshape your day-to-day activities around these really very small and nuanced aspects of the machine. And so, you know, I just wanted to offer that example because I do talk a lot about, you know, the glitch and failure and breakdown in my other written work. And I do think that that's why I really wanted to develop the concept of kind of data demons for the Leonardo piece, is really about moving, you know, away from this idea of data and these devices as being pure kind of representations of the body, and instead to talk about, you know, things like when the sensor data doesn't really match up with, you know, the data you might gather from your meter, or even just how you feel that day. And, you know, some of those frictions, I think, are what's really interesting to look at when you look at the ways technologies mediate lived experience.
All right, thank you. All right, and Aminder, I'd like to invite your response to this question.
My use of machines include the amount of prostheses covering 65% of my skeletal system, alongside intravenous pain medication devices, but it also encompasses medical data and the act of reclaiming it. I use a process that I call dual hacking, which describes the physical and symbolic acts of tinkering and reconstructing medical technologies and transforming these devices from symbols of medicalization into sites of radical agency. And I do this to reclaim and reassert my autonomy, agency, and dignity, all of which that I've often been stripped of, starting even prior to my birth, when my mother was 6 months pregnant with me and the doctors informed her that I was disabled, and they recommended trigger warning, an abortion. Yet when I was born, my body was then contrastly like spotlighted as a medical spectacle and as a source of data that was often exploited beyond the ethical norms, and pushing corrective surgeries to fit this non-disabled ideal, all under the kind of pretext of care. I was often asked to strip down to my underwear whilst doctors manipulated my body as if I was a toy, and doctors would encircle me and watch and scrutinize my body. And this was heightened by the fact that I was born and live with a 3-in-1 muscle, bone, and connective tissue disease, of which I'm only 1 in 14 currently reported in the world with, which is unnamed due to lack of medical reporting, but it renders me as an object of curiosity under the doctor's gaze. And a part of this is the horrendous amount of radiation and medical imaging technologies that have been exposed to my body, considering that it's been over 30 plus years. I also struggle to get a lot of my x-rays back just due to sheer amount of how many I had. Once I finally obtained these X-rays, I started reimagining of what my X-rays would look like if they captured the multidimensional and intersectional reality of my body, mind, and identity and existence. Especially as in media and art, I'm still yet to see a disabled brown South Asian visibly disabled person. So in this sense, a lot of my use of machines is not only within my own body, but is also the machines that I've been exposed to, and reclaiming these acts and re-empowering myself by reclaiming all of my elements of my identity.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This is really moving. Okay, so we're gonna switch to our next question now. So this next question is, how do you think about archives in your work? Disability is often missing from archives and documentation, which of course impacts disability culture's collective memory and histories. So we're wondering how you make it legible and accessible to a broader community, because there are challenges to making archives accessible as well. So we're going to start with Darren on this question, and then we'll move to a few others.
This whole conversation is making me think about my history of working with archives in my own work as an artist. I really come to curating, which is what the essay is centered on, through the lens of an artist, not as I don't identify necessarily as a curator. I've talked some about working particularly with the institution like of electronic arts intermix in regards to trying to access works that may have some semblance of a kind of Crip representation, or rereading works that could be thought of as dealing with access, even if that wasn't the intention of the artist, and then providing other access points as well. And I think when it's kind of, archives are overwhelming, whether they're on my own personal archive or an institutional archive. And my experience, trying to put this first version together, you always think you're especially large archives, you're going to miss something. It's kind of what's in their discovery approach. It can be very, kind of sloppy, and but it's, I really feel like the folks at Rebecca Clemens and Charlotte Strange at Electronic Arts Intermix were really amazing guides. But this whole conversation is also making me think, when did I first, as an artist, even work with an archive? And it's curious, because I just started realizing, oh yeah, it was every time I got an audiology exam throughout the aughts, I documented those exams, even sometimes when I was a test subject. I have a bone anchored hearing aid on one side, that I'm in deaf on the right side. And I was a test subject to how one could localize sound using this prosthesis. And so every time I was ever examined, became a document, and a number of works came out of that, single channel experimental works, installations as well. But it's also a moment that was very, looking back at those archives, crucial to thinking about, how I perceive the world and how I move through the world. I acquired pretty loud tinnitus in this ringing in my head when I lost hearing in my right ear. And often in these audiology exams, the frequencies they're pumping into me to test my hearing are sometimes equal to the pitches that I'm creating myself. So this idea of like an interior and exterior became very viscerally blurred. And that has really informed a lot of my work going forward. And sometimes also in these archives, the camera can pick up the words that I'm being asked by the audiologist that I couldn't. So it's a kind of, within the archive, I can rediscover some things that that kind of went missing in the form of actually experiencing it first person. So yeah, it's been, I'll just share that for the moment, but it's been making me think about other kinds of ways I've worked with kind of personal archives in my work as well.
That's so interesting. Thank you, Dan. Okay, so we're going to go to Erica Jean next.
Hello again. I realized I didn't answer this question in my texts, so I'm gonna freewheel it for everyone. So I think working in media arts, this has always been an issue, not only just videotape or audio tape and degradation and preserving. And then I'm going to keep looking at the question. If I'm looking at the right question. How do I make it legible and accessible to a broader community? I don't know. I mean, it's hard because there's also who's collecting work. Yeah. And especially if you're working with technologies, if there's no collections in the museums and galleries, then is there any voice being heard or seen? I guess as an artist myself, I can work towards being and making my work as accessible for audiences, and also making art accessible, like working with artist-run centers like I do with being a board members on organizations that work with disability and also with education, and that I think I'll leave it there, and that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Erica. I really appreciate that question about who's collecting these archives. I think that positionality is so important and doesn't get asked often enough. Okay, so we're going to go back to Laura, and I think you touched on this a little bit, and then we'll close out with Amindo.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a lot as a writer about text and how invisible disabilities such as type 1 diabetes and this lived experience is then translated into the sculptures. And one of the things that I talk about in the piece is a little bit of a tension around the recognition around authorship. And this is partly because from a perhaps from a curatorial perspective, the types of data that needs to go on the wall next to an artwork, includes the specific materials, but how is my data recognized as a material, as going into the, feeding the software that controls the movements of the sculptures? And then how is my data presented as a text in other sculptures? And so it was interesting to see that, my first experience in the gallery, there was a range of different ways in which my collaboration with Itzhar was present. And then, we've had a number of discussions since then about especially, the still very individualistic practice, both of art and of writing, in terms of who gets recognized and how they get recognized. We're still very much in kind of a single author world in terms of books and exhibitions. And I think that's really a barrier because especially if we think about Crip Technoscience or networks of mutual aid, kind of collective ability to rely on one another, interdependence, things that come up quite often in Crip and disabled communities. I think we do need to think a little bit more carefully about what is Crip authorship when it comes to art, and what is Crip authorship when it comes to writing as well.
Such interesting questions to ponder. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so Amindo.
I often think of the body as an archive, and also elements that have been removed from my body that I keep, which doctors think are very strange. And in my practice, I actively engage with and try to transform personal, private archives alongside public archives to highlight and reinsert disability culture and collective memory into these histories. For EcoCrip, I delved into historical archives to find the names of South Asian botanical artists whose works, credits, and acknowledgements were erased and misattributed to colonial commissioners. And whilst I found a few which are listed on my website, I struggled quite a lot in that quest because the names have been erased across historical archives because they've been kind of just constructed through biased colonialist and imperialist narratives and memories and selective hidden histories. And to confront that, I annotated my work with Punjabi scripture, and by manipulating and repurposing archival materials such as medical images and indigenous flora images, I tried to recontextualize these elements within a contemporary art framework to emphasize elements of disability justice and intersectionality that are often excluded from mainstream art and media. And I also tried to challenge conventional archival and representational practice. What is an archive? Which archives are made public? And I also try to confront the historical biases that are embedded in the medical and botanical archives. By creating my own archive with EcoCrip, by merging my brown disabled body mind with Indian flora, I'm aiming to make visible the personal and collective past, present, and future of disabled BIPOC individuals, and challenge this kind of erasure and marginalization that is inherent in traditional archival practices.
Thank you, Amindo. So much, so many questions and responses to ponder here. We are starting to come to the end of things. So what we're going to do is just take a beat, remind everyone that we will have a Q&A coming up, and then we have a final question. We're going to have to maybe skip over the last question and or the second last question and go to the last question. Just have an open invitation to the contributors to respond before we move to Q&A. If you do have a question, please let us know so we can add that to our docket. But the question we'd like to invite everyone to engage with before opening up to Q&A is, what are your hopes for the future of this artistic field? And if you would like to respond, anyone here, please feel free to do so.
I wanted to say something. It's Erica Jean.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I really, for hopes and futures that I had put down was that Lindsay and Vanessa, when you wrote in the end note about systems of care and repair in art making and the metaphor of media arts and technologies. And I think what's interesting is everybody here, I'm going to make an assumption and generalize, but I'm really finding a community that I've been missing for 20 years. And I'm so happy that this is coming out as a thing, a real thing. And yay, Claudia! And And I remember 10 years ago, I mentioned that one of my robots was a component that was actually a stand-in for me. And I was told, no, it's not. And I think what happens is that we think about art as a sort of singular thing that floats in its outside of us. And I'm gonna stop.
Thank you, Erica Jean. Isolde and Marina, you said you might have a response to add at this time.
The company that made this communication system that I am using follows the obliged beliefs of the same medical system that discriminates against nonverbal people. They build a communication program that is not designed to give a nonverbal person access to communicate abstract thoughts, complex concepts, express creative ideas. Over many years, my caregiving team redesigned this technology to give me greater access to express my creativity.
Yeah, I mean, so I would add to that for the specific AAC technology, my goodness, is this a labor of love and care, primarily through Isolde's assistant technology provider, who's also her mother and caregiver, in order to be able to create access for Isolde to verbal expression. And so it's such a rudimentary program, relatively, and it needs to be redesigned to just open up the imagination that thinking is not linear, that expression is not linear, that there are so many ways that communication and thoughts happen. And from my perspective, I would say that the relationship our relationship is everything. The technology is a mere add-on to the communication between us. It's not mere, it's very important. It's very important for Isolde, and I understand that. But there is no communication without relational embodiment, and that is the groundwork of any technological intervention, assistance, etc. Whether it's the relationship between my own continuous glucose monitor, between my husband and I and my blood sugar, between Isolde and I and this tool. We live in a relational world, not a simplistic, mechanical, linear world. And but these whole systems just all need to be reimagined. And that's what Crip Technoscience is about. And disability artistry and thought. And as you can probably tell, that was a resonance from Isolde.
Thank you, Isolde and Marina. Laura, Aminder, Darren, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, I think one thing I would love would be more specific and granular practices. You know, I cite in the piece the Tobin Sieber's disability aesthetics, but I think that there must be, you know, just among the works that we've shared, so many more nuanced descriptions. So one, I would love to be contributing to more specific ways to talk about disability aesthetics that relate to our works. But in addition to that, I also worry a little bit about isolation, you know, about this kind of work only happening within a Crip arts community. And I would also like integration into other arts communities.
This is Darren chiming in. Just to bounce off that, I absolutely agree. I'm thinking a lot about that. And I'm thinking about Claudia's definition of access friction. And, you know, my hopes for the future is that, you know, frictions are about bodies, you know, bodies coming together, right? And my hope for the future is that these conversations, these needs, even more than Karen needs, are extend out beyond a particular community. And it's, you know, it's curious. I'm as an educator getting ready for our grad thesis exhibitions, realizing that one grad kind of came in a little at the 11th hour with like interest in trying to make their exhibition more accessible, and I was like witness to that friction extending out beyond you know, this disability arts community, and I'm excited to see more of that, you know, and see where it takes us, you know.
Aminda, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Literally everything has already been mentioned. I just want to echo the same sentiment, but also it would be wonderful to see more intersection between different disciplines with Crip Technoscience, and building upon what Laura was saying about disability aesthetics, and finding a larger vocabulary to explain these brilliant new ways that disabled people are reshaping and rewording.
Thank you, Aminda. And with that, we're at time, but I wanted to share the one question that's come in, because in a way, you just all kind of answered it, which is, how does engagement with this special issue of Leonardo advance or affect your creative practice? And how would you hope Leonardo further integrates Criptech in our art, science, and technology community? So what I've heard, if they're from a lot of you, is that you're seeking more integration across the field. I'd be interested to hear how your engagement with this issue advances or affects your creative practice. I will say we're at time. If it's okay with everyone to go a few minutes over, we can give some space to address that and invite any other questions. Nope, feel adequately answered by your anticipation. Great. It seems like there's no other questions coming in, so maybe it's an appropriate time to wrap things up. Is there anything anyone else would like to add that you haven't had the chance to say? There's so much to say. I feel like we're just scraping the surface, and we invite you to read the issue. There's so much that's additionally said there, and we're just so much gratitude for the contributors today who've joined us, everyone who's turned up here today, and the community that we've been trying to build together. Lindsay, would you like to
Yeah, I would also
anything?
again like to echo Vanessa and the thoughts of what folks have shared here, and to also share my gratitude to the other contributors to this special issue who didn't get a chance to speak today. And I can't tell you how meaningful it was to work with everybody to bring this issue to life. I think it's really going to be transformational and field shifting, and I'm eager to keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, everyone. And yes, we'll post this video, this event will be posted as a recording if you'd like to revisit it. If you do have any questions or comments, as Jason's writing in the chat, please feel free to email us at criptech@leonardo.info. Have a most beautiful day, all.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, I think we can turn the recording